Poetry, Language, Thought by Martin Heidegger. Quotes. Poetry, Language, Thought by Martin Heidegger explores the intricate relationships between art, language, and the act of thinking, emphasizing how poetry serves as a primary mode of dwelling in the world. Heidegger brings readers into a philosophical examination of language as not merely a tool for communication, but as a way of engaging with being itself. Through essays on themes like the origin of the work of art, building dwelling thinking, and the thing, he examines how language and poetry reveal the concealed aspects of existence, allowing humans to dwell authentically. This collection of essays emphasizes the role of poetry in not just depicting reality, but in opening up spaces where truth can manifest, calling readers to consider art as a space where the world and the earth, the divine and the human, converge in a meaningful unity. Quote 1. The artist is the origin of the work. The work is the origin of the artist. Neither is without the other. Nevertheless, neither is the sole support of the other. This quote emphasizes the mutual relationship between the artist and the artwork, where each exists because of the other. However, neither can be completely defined by the other alone. Both rely on a third entity, art itself, to provide the foundation for their existence. This circular relationship challenges traditional views by suggesting that art is a force that both precedes and transcends the artist and the artwork. Quote 2. Art is present in the artwork. But what and how is a work of art? Here, Heidegger raises the central question about the nature of art by pointing out that while art manifests through the artwork, understanding what art truly is requires more than just looking at works of art. The query touches on the philosophical dilemma of defining art by asking not only what an artwork is, but how it functions as an expression of art. Quote 3. All works have this thingly character. What would they be without it? Heidegger highlights that all art objects possess a material or thingly nature, which is inseparable from their existence. The physicality of the artwork, whether stone, wood, or sound, is fundamental to what makes it an artwork. This material element anchors art in reality, but also opens up the question of how much more there is beyond this mere thingness. Quote 4. The work makes public something other than itself. It manifests something other. It is an allegory. This quote illustrates Heidegger's notion that an artwork is not just a physical object, but also carries deeper meanings and truths. It serves as an allegory, a vehicle for revealing something beyond its immediate appearance. The artwork's role is to disclose a reality or truth that extends beyond its material form. Quote 5. We never really first perceive a throng of sensations, e.g., tones and noises, in the appearance of things, as this thing concept alleges. Rather, we hear the storm whistling in the chimney. We hear the three-motored plane. Heidegger challenges the traditional notion that we perceive individual sensations, arguing instead that we experience the totality of things directly. For example, we do not hear mere sounds, but rather we understand them immediately as part of a meaningful context, like a storm or an airplane. This emphasizes his belief in direct perception of things as wholes, not fragmented sensory data. Quote 6. But even these are not mere things. Only a stone, a clod of earth, a piece of wood are for us such mere things. Heidegger draws a distinction between objects we use, such as tools or artworks, and simple natural entities like stones or earth. While tools and artworks have significance beyond their physicality, mere things like stones are defined solely by their material existence. This distinction highlights the difference between functional objects and the purely material world. Quote 7. But selecting works from among given objects and deriving concepts from principles are equally impossible here, and where these procedures are practiced, they are a self-deception. Heidegger is warning against the method of trying to derive the essence of art through the simple comparison of artworks or by relying on abstract principles. He claims that such methods are misleading and do not truly capture the nature of art, which demands a different, deeper approach to understanding. Quote 8. A piece of equipment, a pair of shoes, for instance, when finished, is also self-contained like the mere thing, but it does not have the character of having taken shape by itself, like the granite boulder. This quote distinguishes between objects that are made by humans for a purpose, such as shoes, and natural objects that form on their own. Equipment has a specific function and exists for a reason, while a natural object, like a rock, exists simply because it does. This highlights the intentionality behind human creations in contrast to the arbitrary existence of natural things. Quote 9. The matter-form structure, however, by which the being of a piece of equipment is first determined, readily presents itself as the immediately intelligible constitution of every entity. Heidegger critiques the traditional understanding of objects in terms of their matter and form. While this structure is commonly applied to all entities, including equipment and art, he suggests that it oversimplifies the complexity of being and limits our understanding of the true nature of things and artworks alike. Quote 10. Thus, it comes about that prevailing thing concepts obstruct the way toward the thingly character of the thing as well as toward the equipmental character of equipment, and all the more toward the workly character of the work. Heidegger argues that conventional ways of understanding objects, tools, and artworks hinder our ability to grasp their true essence. The preconceived notions of what constitutes a thing limit deeper reflection on what makes something an artwork or a tool, urging us to reconsider these categories from a fresh perspective. Quote 11. The equipmental quality of equipment consists in its usefulness. Heidegger emphasizes that the defining characteristic of equipment lies in its practical function. In this context, equipment serves its purpose, becoming meaningful through its use, and it is through this utility that its nature is revealed. The peasant shoes in Van Gogh's painting exemplify this, as their meaning emerges from their connection to the daily life and toil of the peasant. Quote 12. From the dark opening of the worn insides of the shoes, the toilsome tread of the worker stares forth. This vivid description of the shoes speaks to how the artwork reveals more than just the shoe's physical form. It unveils the life, labor, and struggles of the wearer. Through the shoes, the artist evokes the reality of the peasant's world, highlighting the deep connection between the equipment and the human experience embedded in it. Quote 13. The equipmental quality of the equipment consists indeed in its usefulness, but this usefulness itself rests in the abundance of an essential being of the equipment. We call it reliability. Heidegger explains that the true essence of equipment is not only its functionality, but also its reliability. This reliability gives the peasant woman confidence in her world, as it guarantees that her equipment will serve her needs. It is this steady assurance that binds her to the earth and her daily reality, making her world secure and livable. Quote 14. In the work of art, the truth of an entity has set itself to work. This statement reflects Heidegger's belief that art reveals the truth of being. The artwork is not merely a representation of reality, but an event in which truth becomes manifest. Through the artwork, the essence of a being, like the shoes or the temple, is brought into the open, allowing us to experience the deeper reality that underlies existence. Quote 15. The temple work, standing there, opens up a world and at the same time sets this world back again on earth, which itself only thus emerges as native ground. Heidegger describes how a Greek temple both establishes and reveals a world. It brings into being the surrounding elements, such as the sky, earth, and sea, by giving them context and meaning. The temple stands as a center, anchoring the people's understanding of their world, while simultaneously being rooted in the earth, reinforcing the interconnectedness of the human the divine, and nature. Quote 16. World withdrawal and world decay can never be undone. The works are no longer the same as they once were. Heidegger laments the loss of the original context of artworks when they are removed from their native settings. Over time, works of art lose their connection to the world they once revealed. As they become objects of preservation or exhibition, they stand before us as relics of a bygone world, stripped of their former vitality and immediacy. Quote 17. The artwork lets us know what shoes are in truth. Heidegger points out that it is through the work of art that we come to understand the deeper essence of things, like shoes. The painting by Van Gogh doesn't just depict shoes, it reveals their true nature by bringing out the connection between the object, the person who uses it, and the world in which it exists. The art discloses a truth that goes beyond mere appearance. Quote 18. We allowed a work to tell us what equipment is. By this means, almost clandestinely, it came to light what is at work in the work. The disclosure of the particular being in its being. The happening of truth. Heidegger suggests that the artwork itself teaches us the nature of equipment, subtly revealing the truth of its being. In observing the work, we are able to grasp the reality of the equipment, which is something that unfolds through the artwork's presence. The work of art serves as a medium through which truth emerges and becomes accessible. Quote 19. The world is not the mere collection of the countable or uncountable familiar and unfamiliar things that are just there. This quote clarifies Heidegger's view that the world is not a simple accumulation of objects, but something more dynamic. The world is a realm of meaning, in which beings are disclosed and interconnected. It is through this open relational context that we encounter the world as a place of significance, not just as a collection of material things. Quote 20. Art is truth setting itself to work. Heidegger encapsulates his view of art in this statement, proposing that art is a process by which truth becomes manifest. In the creation and existence of the artwork, truth is revealed not as a static concept, but as something that actively emerges. This definition elevates art beyond aesthetics, positioning it as a fundamental way in which truth about the world and being is brought into the open. Quote 21. The world is the self-disclosing openness of the broad paths of the simple and essential decisions in the destiny of a historical people. Heidegger explains that world is not just a collection of objects or things, it is an open space where fundamental decisions and actions of a people unfold. It provides the context in which individuals and societies define their destinies. This world is dynamic and ever-changing, shaped by the decisions and experiences of historical peoples, offering a framework for their existence. Quote 22. The earth is essentially self-secluding. Heidegger highlights the earth's nature as something that conceals itself. Unlike the world, which is open and exposed, the earth withdraws and remains hidden. This self-seclusion means that the earth cannot be fully grasped or understood in its entirety, as it continuously evades disclosure, holding within itself a mystery that resists human mastery or understanding. Quote 23. In setting up a world and setting forth the earth, the work is an instigating of this striving. Heidegger asserts that the work of art plays a key role in bringing together the opposing forces of world and earth. Through art, the dynamic tension between these forces is instigated and maintained. The work does not seek to resolve the conflict between world and earth, but rather emphasizes and preserves this essential striving, allowing the creative tension to unfold in the artwork. Quote 24. The work being of the work consists in the fighting of the battle between world and earth. Heidegger views the essence of the artwork as a battleground where the world and earth confront one another. This conflict defines the nature of the work itself, as it embodies the tension between openness, world, and concealment, earth. The artwork's identity and presence emerge from this continuous struggle. which is fundamental to its existence. Quote 25. The artwork lets the earth be an earth. Heidegger suggests that through the artwork, the earth is allowed to reveal itself in its true form. The artwork does not dominate or exploit the earth. Rather, it brings the earth's self-seclusion into the open, allowing it to be seen and appreciated as it is. In doing so, the artwork honors the earth's inherent mystery and refusal to be fully known. Quote 26. Beauty is one way in which truth occurs as unconcealedness. Heidegger connects beauty with truth, stating that beauty is a mode in which truth becomes revealed or unconcealed. In this view, beauty is not merely an aesthetic experience, but a deeper manifestation of truth coming into the open through the artwork. The experience of beauty in art, then, is tied to the disclosure of deeper truths about the world and existence. Quote 27. Truth occurs precisely as itself, in that the concealing denial, as refusal, provides its constant source to all clearing. Heidegger argues that truth is not just about what is revealed, but also about what is concealed or denied. The act of refusal or concealment is integral to the process of revealing truth. This tension between clearing, revealing, and concealing, withholding, is what makes truth dynamic, as it is always intertwined with aspects that remain hidden or undisclosed. Quote 28. The work's becoming a work is a way in which truth becomes and happens. Heidegger emphasizes that the creation of an artwork is a process through which truth comes into being and reveals itself. The artwork, in its unfolding, is not just an object or creation, but a medium through which truth is made manifest. The artwork's emergence is tied to the disclosure of deeper realities and truths about existence. Quote 29. The world grounds itself on the earth, and earth juts through world. This quote highlights the interdependence of world and earth. The world, with its openness and pathways, is rooted in the earth, while the earth, with its self-seclusion, pushes through the world. This relationship is one of mutual dependence, where the two forces interact and influence one another, forming the foundation of existence as understood in Heidegger's philosophy. Quote 30. In the midst of beings as a whole, an open place occurs. There is a clearing, a lighting. Heidegger explains the concept of the clearing, or aletheia, where truth is revealed. In the midst of all beings, there is a space where beings become visible and can be understood. This clearing is essential for human understanding and engagement with the world, as it allows things to be seen and known within their true context, providing clarity and insight. Quote 31. Truth happens only by establishing itself in the conflict and sphere opened up by truth itself. Heidegger expresses that truth does not exist as a preformed entity, but occurs within the conflict between revealing, lighting, and concealing. This conflict creates an openness where truth can emerge, and it is in this space that truth is brought into being. Truth is not static, but is always engaged in a dynamic process of unveiling and concealing. Quote 32. The establishing of truth in the work is the bringing forth of a being such as never was before, and will never come to be again. Here, Heidegger emphasizes that the creation of an artwork is a unique event in which something entirely new is brought into existence. This creation is not a mere reproduction, but a one-time occurrence where the essence of the being is revealed, showing the artwork's singular and unrepeatable nature. Quote 33. The conflict is not a rift, as a mere cleft is ripped open. Rather, it is the intimacy with which opponents belong to each other. Heidegger clarifies that the conflict between world and earth, or between revealing and concealing, is not a destructive force, but a relationship of interdependence. The opposing forces are intimately connected, and their conflict is what allows for the emergence of truth. It is through this struggle that both forces are elevated and brought into unity. Quote 34. Createdness of the work means truths being fixed in place in the figure. Heidegger explains that the process of creation fixes truth into a physical form, or figure. The artwork, through its form, becomes a place where truth is established and made visible. This act of creation is not just about making something physical, but about revealing truth through the material world. Quote 35. The work casts before itself the eventful fact that the work is as this work, and it has constantly this fact about itself. This quote suggests that an artwork continually presents its own existence. It is not merely an object, but constantly asserts that it is, and in doing so, it emphasizes its own presence and being. The artwork perpetually draws attention to the fact of its existence as a unique creation, distinguishing itself from ordinary objects. Quote 36. Preserving the work means standing within the openness of beings that happens in the work. Heidegger states that to preserve an artwork is to remain engaged with the truth that the work reveals. Preservation is not a passive act, but an active participation in the openness and truth that the work embodies. It requires an understanding and recognition of the work's essence and truth, rather than merely keeping it intact physically. Quote 37. Language alone brings what is, as something that is, into the open for the first time. Heidegger argues that it is through language that beings are revealed as they truly are. Without language, there is no way for beings to be brought into the openness of existence. Language, through naming, gives beings their identity and allows them to appear in the world, making them accessible and understandable to us. Quote 38. Poetry is the saying of the unconcealedness of what is. Heidegger defines poetry as the act of revealing truth. Through poetry, the hidden aspects of existence are brought into the open, making them accessible and understandable. Poetry is a powerful force that brings forth what is hidden, allowing the truth of beings to emerge into the light. Quote 39. Art, as the setting into work of truth, is poetry. Heidegger encapsulates his view that all art is essentially poetry because it brings truth into being. Art sets truth into motion and makes it visible, just as poetry does. This view connects all forms of art, from architecture to painting, to the broader concept of poetry as the creative act that reveals the truth of existence. Quote 40. The nature of art is poetry. The nature of poetry, in turn, is the founding of truth. Heidegger concludes that the essence of art lies in its poetic nature, and poetry itself is about establishing truth. Through art and poetry, truth is founded, revealed, and made manifest. Art and poetry are thus deeply intertwined with the nature of truth, acting as vehicles through which truth emerges and becomes part of human experience. Quote 41. Founding is an overflow, an endowing, a bestowal. This quote expresses that the act of founding is not merely creating something new, but is an act of overflowing, a generous giving of something profound. The founding of art, in this sense, is not a mere contribution to culture, but an offering that reveals deeper truths and opens new possibilities for understanding existence and being. Quote 42. A beginning, on the contrary, always contains the undisclosed abundance of the unfamiliar and extraordinary, which means that it also contains strife with the familiar and ordinary. Heidegger emphasizes that a true beginning is rich with hidden potential and often disrupts what is already known. This newness creates a conflict with the familiar, challenging established norms and opening up space for extraordinary insights and truths. It is through this strife that art and truth find their most authentic expression. Quote 43. Whenever art happens, that is, whenever there is a beginning, a thrust enters history. History either begins or starts over again. Heidegger points out that art has the power to initiate a new chapter in history. When art emerges, it acts as a force that reshapes history, providing humanity with a new direction or a fresh perspective. Each moment of genuine artistic creation is a historical event that redefines the cultural and existential landscape. Quote 44. Art lets truth originate. Art, founding preserving, is the spring that leaps to the truth of what is in the work. Heidegger articulates that art is a force that allows truth to emerge. Through the creation and preservation of art, truth is revealed and made manifest in the world. Art serves as a source, a wellspring from which the truth of existence flows and is brought into the open, allowing us to encounter it through the artwork. Quote 45. The origin of the work of art, that is, the origin of both the creators and the preservers, which is to say of a people's historical existence, is art. Heidegger asserts that art is the foundation of not only individual creations, but also of a people's collective historical existence. Art creates both the artist and the community that preserves the artwork, shaping the identity and history of a people. It is through art that a culture or a people come into being and define their place in history. Quote 46. The truth of which we have spoken does not coincide with that which is generally recognized under the name and assigned to cognition and science as a quality in order to distinguish from it the beautiful and the good, which function as names for the values of non-theoretical activities. In this quote, Heidegger distinguishes between the truth revealed in art and the truth understood in scientific or cognitive terms. The truth in art is not just about objective knowledge or theoretical correctness, but is deeply intertwined with the beautiful and the good, emerging through creative expression and experience, not limited to intellectual pursuits. Quote 47. Truth is the unconcealedness of that which is as something that is. Heidegger defines truth as the act of revealing, or unconcealing, that which exists. Truth is not something that can be entirely grasped or possessed, but is the process of bringing something into the open, allowing it to show itself in its fullness. This unconcealing is central to Heidegger's philosophy of art, where the artwork makes truth visible. Quote 48. Beauty does not occur alongside and apart from this truth. When truth sets itself into the work, it appears. Heidegger explains that beauty is not separate from truth. Instead, beauty is the visible manifestation of truth when it reveals itself through the artwork. In this view, beauty is not a superficial aesthetic quality, but an essential aspect of truth's appearance in the world, intertwined with the deeper realities that art brings forth. Quote 49. The origin of the work of art deliberately yet tacitly moves on the path of the question of the nature of being. Heidegger suggests that the true investigation of art leads us toward a deeper philosophical question about the nature of being itself. Art is not just a cultural or aesthetic phenomenon, but is fundamentally related to the exploration of existence. The work of art opens up the possibility for us to engage with and reflect on the nature of being. Quote 50. Art is considered neither an area of cultural achievement nor an appearance of spirit. It belongs to the disclosure of appropriation by way of which the meaning of being can alone be defined. In this passage, Heidegger emphasizes that art should not be understood merely as a cultural or intellectual accomplishment. Instead, art is integral to the process of revealing the meaning of being. It is through art that we can come closer to understanding the true nature of existence, as it allows being to disclose itself in ways that other forms of knowledge cannot. Quote 51. The world's night is spreading its darkness. The era is defined by the God's failure to arrive, by the default of God. Heidegger, through Hölderlin's poetry, reflects on the idea of a destitute time, when divine presence has receded and humanity faces a profound spiritual emptiness. This world's night signifies a period of decline, where the absence of a guiding God leaves humanity without direction. The default of God doesn't imply that belief in God has vanished, but rather that divine power no longer shapes human history visibly, leaving the world in spiritual disarray. Quote 52. The time of the world's night is the destitute time, because it becomes ever more destitute. This quote underscores the ongoing deepening of the world's spiritual poverty. As time progresses, the destitution becomes more pronounced, not only because of the absence of gods, but also because humanity increasingly loses awareness of this very absence. The worsening destitution reflects the growing disconnection from the divine and the ultimate truths of existence, resulting in a spiritual void. Quote 53. The turning of the age does not take place by some new god, or the old one renewed, bursting into the world from ambush at some time or other. Heidegger challenges the expectation of a sudden, miraculous return of divine forces to restore balance. Instead, he suggests that the renewal of spiritual and existential understanding must come from within humanity itself. There is no deus ex machina that will rescue the world. Rather, humans must prepare themselves and their world for a new form of divine presence. Quote 54. Poets are the mortals who, singing earnestly of the wine god, sense the trace of the fugitive gods, stay on the gods' tracks, and so trace for their kindred mortals the way toward the turning. Heidegger defines poets as those sensitive enough to detect the faint traces left behind by departed gods. In a time when divinity seems absent, poets take on the role of guides, using their art to reconnect humanity with the divine. By staying close to the traces of the gods, poets help point the way toward a potential spiritual renewal or turning in human history. Quote 55. To be a poet in a destitute time means to attend, singing, to the trace of the fugitive gods. In this reflection, Heidegger captures the essential task of the poet in an age of spiritual emptiness. Poets must carefully observe and interpret the faint remnants of divinity in the world, expressing them through their work. The poet's role is not to restore the gods, but to acknowledge and articulate their traces, keeping alive the possibility of their return. Quote 56. The closer the world's night draws toward midnight, the more exclusively does the destitute prevail, in such a way that it withdraws its very nature and presence. Heidegger reflects on the increasing intensity of the world's destitution. As the world's night approaches its darkest point, the destitution becomes so pervasive that it begins to hide even its own presence, making it difficult for people to recognize the depth of their spiritual poverty. This creates a profound crisis, where the true nature of the destitution is obscured. Quote 57. The time is destitute because it lacks the unconcealedness of the nature of pain, death, and love. Heidegger identifies the true source of destitution as the loss of a deep understanding of fundamental human experiences like pain, death, and love. These existential realities are no longer fully grasped or appreciated, leading to a state of spiritual impoverishment. Without this unconcealedness, humanity loses touch with the essential truths of existence, furthering the destitution. Quote 58. It remains unclear what the track leading to the trace might be. This quote reflects the uncertainty and challenge of navigating a spiritually destitute time. While there may still be traces of the divine, the path to understanding and following them is obscured. Heidegger emphasizes the difficulty of finding clarity in a world where even the means to reconnect with the divine are uncertain, deepening the spiritual crisis. Quote 59. The poet things his way into the locality defined by that lightening of being which has reached its characteristic shape as the realm of Western metaphysics in its self-completion. Here, Heidegger describes the poet's task as engaging deeply with the metaphysical understanding of being that has shaped Western thought. The poet works within this tradition to explore and express the truths of existence, helping to illuminate the nature of being even as it reaches its most complete, and perhaps most forgotten, form in the history of thought. Quote 60. The more obscure the traces become, the less can a single mortal, reaching into the abyss, attend there to intimations and signs. Heidegger reflects on the increasing difficulty of connecting with the divine as the traces of the gods become more faint. In a world where spiritual and existential signs are almost obliterated, it becomes nearly impossible for individuals to perceive the remnants of divinity. This further complicates the task of poets and mortals seeking to reconnect with deeper truths. Quote 61. The essence of technology comes to the light of day only slowly. This day is the world's night, rearranged into merely technological day. Heidegger explains that technology's true nature is only gradually revealed. The world, dominated by technology, transforms into a technological day, which paradoxically deepens the world's night, or spiritual darkness. Technology promises progress, but in doing so, leads to a state of blindness where humanity loses its connection to the deeper essence of being, creating a hollow and unholy existence. Quote 62. The wholesome and sound withdraws. The world becomes, without healing, unholy. Heidegger suggests that in a world overwhelmed by technology, the natural order and its inherent healing qualities retreat. The more we immerse ourselves in technological advances, the further we move from what is wholesome, healthy, and spiritually intact, leading to a world that becomes unholy, disconnected from any sense of sacredness or meaningfulness. Quote 63. But where there is danger, there grows also what saves. Drawing from Hölderlin, Heidegger reflects on the idea that within the greatest threats, such as the loss of humanity's essence due to technology, the potential for salvation also arises. This danger challenges humanity to find a deeper connection to being. And in that search, the possibility for recovery and renewal is born. The key is recognizing the danger in order to discover the path to salvation. Quote 64. Man is at times more venturesome even than life itself is. Life here means beings in their being, nature. Heidegger speaks of man's daring nature, which can surpass even life itself. By this, he means that human beings can go beyond mere existence, nature, and engage more deeply with the essence of being. This venturesome spirit leads humanity to confront the unknown, such as the abyss or the groundlessness of existence, pushing beyond the limitations of natural life. Quote 65. This daring brings us a safety, just there, where the pure force's gravity rules. Heidegger describes how human daring, which leads individuals into existential risk and danger, paradoxically creates a sense of safety. This safety is not found in the conventional sense of protection, but in an alignment with the deeper forces of being, where one feels secure through an acceptance of their unprotectedness. This gravity refers to the profound, invisible forces that hold all beings together. Quote 66. It is our unshieldedness on which we depend. Heidegger suggests that human vulnerability, or unshieldedness, is not something to fear, but is the very condition that allows us to truly exist and engage with the world. Rather than relying on defenses or protections, it is through embracing our openness and exposure to danger that we find true security and connection to being. Quote 67. The parting against the open is inverted, so that it turns toward the open and into it. Heidegger explains that instead of resisting the openness of being, or the unknown, humanity must turn toward it and embrace it. This reversal involves an acceptance of vulnerability and a movement away from the objectification of the world, allowing for a deeper relationship with the true essence of being, which offers safety and fulfillment. Quote 68. To turn unshieldedness into the open means to affirm unshieldedness within the widest orbit. Heidegger reflects on the importance of affirming one's vulnerability and embracing it within the vastness of existence. Rather than seeing unshieldedness as a weakness, it should be seen as an essential part of being, one that aligns with the openness and boundlessness of existence. This affirmation allows humans to find security not in protection, but in openness. Quote 69. The daring that is more venturesome, willing more strongly than any self-assertion, because it is willing, creates a secureness for us in the open. Here, Heidegger suggests that the more daring forms of willing, which go beyond self-assertion and control, create a deeper sense of security in the openness of existence. This kind of daring does not seek to dominate or control the world, but accepts the uncertainty of being, thus creating a space where true safety can emerge through acceptance and openness. Quote 70. Death is the side of life that is averted from us, unillumined by us. Heidegger, through Rilke, reflects on death as an integral part of life, one that remains hidden and unacknowledged. It is not a negative aspect, but a necessary and essential part of existence that needs to be understood and embraced. Death, though concealed, is a crucial element of the whole of life, and recognizing this allows for a fuller engagement with the nature of being. Quote 71. We ceaselessly gather the honey of the visible, to store it up in the great golden beehive of the invisible. Heidegger reflects on how human beings collect visible experiences, but these are ultimately stored in an invisible realm, highlighting the way external reality connects with internal unseen depths. This metaphor of gathering honey suggests that what is external, what we perceive and experience, is transmuted into something deeper and more meaningful within the invisible spaces of the heart and mind. Quote 72. The interiority of the world's inner space unbars the open for us. Only what we thus retain in our heart, only that do we truly know by heart. Heidegger emphasizes that it is through the inner realm, the heart's interior space, that we access true understanding. The open is the realm of pure, unconcealed truth, but we can only grasp it by internalizing it, making it a part of ourselves. What we truly know, we carry within us, not as mere knowledge, but as an integral part of our being. Quote 73. To be sure, the poem says that a secureness of our nature comes to us by man's being adventurous, more sometimes than life itself is, more daring by a breath. Here, Heidegger describes the existential daring required to go beyond ordinary life. Humans, at times, venture beyond the natural limitations of existence, risking more than life itself. This excess of daring, beyond what is typical or expected, allows humanity to explore deeper truths and meanings. Quote 74. The more venturesome are the poets, but poets whose song turns our unprotected being into the open. Heidegger identifies poets as those who take on the greatest risks, venturing beyond the protected, superficial layers of existence to reveal deeper truths. Poets, through their art, expose the vulnerabilities of human existence and open the way for others to experience and understand the profound reality of being. Quote 75. They are those who are more daring by a breath. It is not for nothing that the words more daring by a breath are followed in the original by 3 dots. The dots tell what is kept silent. This quote emphasizes the subtlety and depth of the poet's daring. The phrase more daring by a breath signals a slight but significant difference that goes beyond what can be explicitly stated. The ellipsis represents the unspeakable, the part of this daring that cannot be fully captured by language, but must be understood in silence. Quote 76. The saying of the more venturesome, which is more fully saying, is the song. Heidegger elevates the act of poetic saying to a higher form of expression, song. For those who are more venturesome, their saying is not just speech, but a song that embodies the truth of existence. This song is a deeper, more profound form of expression that transcends ordinary language and connects to the essence of being. Quote 77. The song of these singers is neither solicitation nor trade. Heidegger emphasizes that the song of the poets is not transactional or utilitarian. It is not about producing something for gain or serving a purpose. Instead, the song is a pure expression of being, free from the demands of production or consumption, existing solely for its own sake and for the truth it conveys. Quote 78. To sing in truth is another breath, a breath for nothing, an afflatus in the God, a wind. Heidegger draws a parallel between truthful singing and a divine breath or wind. This breath is not aimed at achieving anything tangible. It is a breath for nothing, signifying an expression that is pure and untainted by material desires. It flows freely, like the wind, representing the connection between the poet's song and the divine or the eternal. Quote 79. The more venturesome will more strongly in that they will in a different way from the purposeful self-assertion of the objectifying of the world. Heidegger explains that those who are more daring approach existence differently. Their will is not focused on controlling or objectifying the world, but is instead aligned with a more profound engagement with being. Their strength comes from this alternative form of willing, which seeks to transcend the superficial pursuit of power or possession. Quote 80. Poets, who are of the more venturesome kind, are underway on the track of the holy, because they experience the unholy as such. Heidegger suggests that poets who dare to venture deeply into existence are attuned to the sacred. By fully confronting the unholy, the chaotic, the fragmented aspects of life, they are able to trace the path toward the holy. Their poetry becomes a journey toward spiritual truth, made possible because they have faced the darkest aspects of existence. Quote 81. We do not dwell because we have built, but we build and have built because we dwell, that is, because we are dwellers. Heidegger emphasizes that dwelling is the fundamental state of being for humans. Building does not come first. Rather, we build because dwelling is already inherent in our existence. This reversal of thinking shows that building structures is an extension of our deeper need to dwell and belong to a place, and not merely a result of practical or functional necessity. Quote 82. To dwell, to be set at peace, means to remain at peace within the free, the preserve, the free sphere that safeguards each thing in its nature. Here, Heidegger suggests that dwelling involves being at peace with one's surroundings, existing in a way that respects and preserves the essence of things. Dwelling is not just physical shelter, but a way of being that allows beings, both human and non-human, to flourish in their own nature. It involves safeguarding the natural order and living in harmony with it. Quote 83. Earth is the serving bearer, blossoming and fruiting, spreading out in rock and water, rising up into plant and animal. Heidegger describes the earth as a nurturing and life-giving entity, a foundation that supports all forms of life. This imagery of the earth emphasizes its active role in the cycle of existence, as something that serves life by allowing it to grow and flourish. It is not a passive entity, but one that continuously participates in the unfolding of life. Quote 84. The sky is the vaulting path of the sun, the course of the changing moon, the wandering glitter of the stars, the years, seasons, and their changes. In this passage, Heidegger poetically describes the sky as a dynamic, ever-changing presence that regulates time and seasons. The sky, as part of the fourfold, earth, sky, divinities, and mortals, represents the cosmic order and the rhythm of natural phenomena, which humans are a part of but often take for granted. Quote 85. The divinities are the beckoning messengers of the Godhead. Out of the holy sway of the Godhead, the God appears in his presence, or withdraws into his concealment. Heidegger explains that divinities act as intermediaries between humans and the divine, sometimes revealing themselves and at other times remaining hidden. This relationship with divinity is not constant or predictable, but when it occurs, it brings meaning and presence to the lives of mortals. The divinities are part of the sacred order that humans must remain open to. Quote 86. The mortals are the human beings. They are called mortals because they can die. To die means to be capable of death as death. Heidegger highlights that mortality is an essential aspect of being human. Unlike other living beings, humans are uniquely aware of their own mortality, and this awareness shapes their existence. Being capable of death means not just that humans die, but that they live with an understanding of death, which informs how they dwell on the earth. Quote 87. Mortals dwell in the way they preserve the fourfold in its essential being, its presencing. In this quote, Heidegger explains that true dwelling involves preserving the essential balance of the fourfold: earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. Mortals dwell by maintaining this balance and ensuring that each element is respected in its proper place. Dwelling is an act of preservation, not domination or exploitation. Quote 88. Saving the earth does not master the earth and does not subjugate it, which is merely one step from spoliation. Heidegger emphasizes that to save the earth is not to control or exploit it, but to respect and care for it in its own right. Mastery over the earth leads to destruction, while saving the earth means allowing it to flourish on its own terms, without imposing human dominance. Quote 89. Staying with things is the only way in which the fourfold stay within the fourfold is accomplished at any time in simple unity. Heidegger argues that dwelling is realized through a relationship with things. By staying with things, humans maintain the unity of the fourfold. It is through everyday interactions with objects and spaces that the harmony of the earth, sky, divinities, and mortals is preserved. Dwelling, therefore, is an active engagement with the world around us. Quote 90. The bridge gathers the earth as landscape around the stream. In describing a bridge, Heidegger explains how it serves as a point of connection, not only physically, but metaphorically. The bridge unites various elements of the landscape, earth, sky, water, bringing them into relation with one another. It is a structure that creates a meaningful connection between the natural world and human existence, gathering the fourfold into one place. Quote 91. The bridge is a thing. It gathers the fourfold, but in such a way that it allows a site for the fourfold. Heidegger explains that a bridge is not just a functional structure, but a gathering place for the fourfold: earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. It creates a space where these elements come together, providing a meaningful site for human dwelling. The bridge, in its essence, is more than a physical connection. It embodies the gathering of fundamental aspects of existence. Quote 92. Space is something that has been made room for, something that is cleared and free, namely, within a boundary. Heidegger describes space as something that comes into being when it is made room for within boundaries. These boundaries do not restrict space, but rather enable its existence, allowing it to be inhabited and experienced. Space, in this sense, is dynamic and relational, shaped by the locations and structures that define it. Quote 93. Spaces receive their being from locations, and not from space. This quote highlights Heidegger's argument that space is not an abstract concept, but is given meaning and existence by specific locations. It is through the presence of things like buildings and bridges that space is created and becomes something that can be experienced. Locations ground space, allowing it to be understood and inhabited. Quote 94. When I say a man, and in saying this word, think of a being who exists in a human manner, that is, who dwells, then by the name man, I already name the stay within the fourfold among things. Heidegger emphasizes that to be human is to dwell, and dwelling means being within the fourfold of earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. The very nature of being human is inseparable from this relationship with the world, and by acknowledging this, we understand that dwelling is an essential part of our existence. Quote 95. The bridge is a location. As such a thing, it allows a space into which earth and heaven, divinities and mortals are admitted. Heidegger describes the bridge as a special kind of location that not only occupies space, but also creates it. The bridge allows a space where the fourfold, earth, sky, divinities, and mortals can exist together, making it a meaningful and essential part of human dwelling. The bridge does more than connect. It admits the fundamental elements of existence into a shared space. Quote 96. Things like such locations shelter or house men's lives. Heidegger points out that locations such as buildings or bridges serve as shelters for human life. They provide more than physical protection. They house the experiences, interactions, and connections that define human dwelling. These locations create spaces where life can unfold meaningfully within the context of the fourfold. Quote 97. The making of such things is building. Its nature consists in this, that it corresponds to the character of these things. Here, Heidegger defines building as the act of creating locations that correspond to the nature of things. Building is not just construction. It is an act of revealing and creating spaces that resonate with the fourfold, allowing the elements of existence, earth, sky, divinities, and mortals to interact harmoniously within the built environment. Quote 98. To preserve the fourfold, to save the earth, to receive the sky, to await the divinities, to escort mortals, this fourfold preserving is the simple nature, the presenting of dwelling. Heidegger explains that true dwelling involves preserving the balance of the fourfold, protecting the earth, acknowledging the sky, waiting for the divine, and guiding mortals. Dwelling is an active process of maintaining and caring for these fundamental elements of existence, ensuring that they are in harmony with one another. Quote 99. The real plight of dwelling is indeed older than the world wars with their destruction. The real dwelling plight lies in this, that mortals ever search anew for the nature of dwelling, that they must ever learn to dwell. Heidegger argues that the true crisis of dwelling is not just about physical homelessness or lack of housing, but about humanity's ongoing struggle to understand and achieve true dwelling. Humans are constantly learning how to dwell, seeking to reconnect with the essential nature of being that involves living in harmony with the fourfold. Quote 100. Building and thinking are, each in its own way, inescapable for dwelling. Heidegger concludes that both building and thinking are necessary components of dwelling. They are intertwined activities that shape how humans live in the world. Building creates the physical spaces for dwelling, while thinking allows us to reflect on and understand the deeper meaning of our existence within the fourfold. Both are essential for creating a meaningful life. Quote 101. Man puts the greatest distances behind himself, and thus puts everything before himself at the shortest range. Heidegger explains that through modern technology, humans have reduced physical distances, making distant places and events accessible almost instantly. However, this shortening of distances does not necessarily bring true nearness. The ease of access does not deepen our connection to things. Rather, it often reduces everything to a uniform proximity that lacks meaningful engagement. Quote 102. Yet the frantic abolition of all distances brings no nearness, for nearness does not consist in shortness of distance. Heidegger emphasizes that nearness is not merely a matter of physical proximity. Despite technology's ability to bring things closer in terms of distance, it does not necessarily create a genuine sense of nearness. Nearness is about a deeper connection, and this is something that technology cannot automatically provide by reducing spatial distances. Quote 103. Everything gets lumped together into uniform distancelessness. In this quote, Heidegger warns that the constant effort to abolish distances through technology results in a state where everything is equally distant or equally near. This creates a kind of distancelessness where the meaningful differences between things, places, and experiences are flattened out, leaving us disconnected from their true essence. Quote 104. The terrifying is unsettling. It places everything outside its own nature. Heidegger reflects on the unsettling nature of modern technological advances, like the atom bomb, which displace things from their natural states. This disruption is terrifying because it strips things of their inherent essence and meaning, placing them in a context where they no longer align with their true nature. Quote 105. Man has so far given no more thought to the thing as a thing than he has to nearness. Heidegger points out that just as humanity has failed to understand true nearness, it has also failed to truly think about things in their essence. We often treat objects as mere instruments or representations, without considering their deeper thingness, or what makes them meaningful in themselves. Quote 106. The jug remains a vessel whether we represent it in our minds or not. As a vessel, the jug stands on its own as self-supporting. Heidegger illustrates that the jug, as a thing, does not depend on our perception or representation of it to exist. Its essence as a vessel is independent and self-supporting. This means that the jug's being is tied to its function of holding, rather than being defined by how we might think of or use it. Quote 107. The emptiness, the void, is what does the vessel's holding. Here, Heidegger argues that the essence of the jug lies not in its material sides or bottom, but in the void inside it. It is this emptiness that allows the jug to hold and contain something. The jug's nature as a vessel depends on this void, making the empty space within the most important part of its existence as a thing. Quote 108. The potter does not, strictly speaking, make the jug. He only shapes the clay. No, he shapes the void. Heidegger reveals that the true essence of the jug is in the void that it contains, not the physical material. The potter shapes the clay around this emptiness, but it is the void itself that defines the jug's capacity to hold. This insight shows that the nature of things is often found in what is not immediately visible or tangible. Quote 109. The gift of the outpouring is what makes the jug a jug. Heidegger explains that the act of giving, whether it is water, wine, or another liquid poured from the jug, is what truly defines the jug. The jug's essence lies in its capacity to give, to outpour. It is through this giving function that the jug fulfills its role as a vessel, making the act of giving central to its thingness. Quote 110. In the gift of the outpouring, earth and sky, divinities and mortals dwell together all at once. Heidegger links the simple act of the jug's outpouring to a deeper harmony between the fourfold: earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. Through this act, these elements come together, highlighting how even an ordinary object, like a jug, participates in the larger cosmic order, bridging the natural and the divine through its function. Quote 111. The jug is a thing insofar as it things. Heidegger introduces the idea that the jug is a thing because it fulfills its purpose of thinging, or gathering and holding. The essence of the jug is not merely in its physical presence, but in how it brings together different elements, such as earth, sky, divinities, and mortals, into a unified, meaningful whole. This thinging defines its existence beyond mere objecthood. Quote 112. The thing things. In thinging, it stays earth and sky, divinities and mortals. Heidegger explains that the thing, by being itself, connects the fourfold: earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. This gathering of the fourfold is what makes a thing more than just a physical object. It is a way for the elements of existence to come together in a harmonious relationship. In this sense, the thing allows the fourfold to stay united. Quote 113. Earth is the building bearer, nourishing with its fruits, tending water and rock, plant and animal. Heidegger describes earth as the foundational element of the fourfold, which sustains and nurtures all living things. The earth provides the necessary resources, such as water and food, that allow life to flourish, making it the essential grounding for existence. In recognizing the earth's role, we understand how it supports and connects with the other elements of the fourfold. Quote 114. The mortals are human beings. They are called mortals because they can die. Heidegger emphasizes that humans are defined by their mortality. Unlike other beings, humans have an awareness of death, which shapes their existence. This capacity to die and to live with the understanding of death is what makes mortals unique, connecting them to the other elements of the fourfold: earth, sky, and divinities. Quote 115. Each of the four mirrors in its own way the presence of the others. In this quote, Heidegger suggests that each element of the fourfold, earth, sky, divinities, and mortals, reflects the presence of the others. They are not isolated entities, but interconnected, and their unity is mirrored through their relationships with one another. This mutual reflection shows the interdependence of all elements of existence. Quote 116. The unity of the fourfold is the fouring. Heidegger introduces the concept of fouring, which refers to the active unity of the fourfold. The fouring is not a passive state, but an ongoing process of interaction between earth, sky, divinities, and mortals. This process allows the fourfold to remain in harmony, with each element contributing to the overall balance of existence. Quote 117. The mirror play of world is the round dance of appropriating. Heidegger describes the interaction of the fourfold as a mirror play, where each element reflects and responds to the others. This dynamic process is likened to a dance, where the elements are continually appropriating and adjusting to one another, creating the world as a unified whole. This interplay of elements forms the essence of the world's existence. Quote 118. The thing stays, gathers and unites the fourfold. Heidegger reiterates that the role of a thing, such as a jug, is to gather and unite the elements of the fourfold. The thing does not merely exist in isolation, it serves a deeper purpose by connecting earth, sky, divinities, and mortals, allowing them to come together in harmony. This gathering is central to the thing's essence. Quote 119. We are thinking of the thing as thing. Taking thought in this way, we let ourselves be concerned by the thing's worlding being. Heidegger invites us to think of the thing in terms of its worlding, or how it participates in the ongoing creation of the world through its connections with the fourfold. By focusing on the thing's role in this process, we shift our attention from its physical characteristics to its deeper meaning and function within the world's existence. Quote 120. The nearing of nearness is the true and sole dimension of the mirror play of the world. Heidegger suggests that true nearness, or meaningful connection, is found in the dynamic interaction of the fourfold. This nearing is not about physical proximity, but about how the elements of earth, sky, divinities, and mortals come together in the world. The mirror play of the world is where this nearness occurs, allowing the elements to relate to one another in their full presence. Quote 121. Man is said to have language by nature. It is held that man, in distinction from plant and animal, is the living being capable of speech. Heidegger begins by emphasizing that language is natural to humans, setting them apart from other living beings. It is through language that humans express their being, as it is a fundamental part of what makes them human. This distinguishes humans not just because they can speak, but because their existence is intertwined with the ability to communicate through language. Quote 122. We would reflect on language itself, and on language only. Language itself is language, and nothing else besides. Here, Heidegger asks us to focus solely on language without reducing it to a mere tool or concept. He insists that language should be considered in its pure form, not as something that serves other purposes. By stating that language is language, he invites a deeper contemplation of language as an independent phenomenon, not something that is explained or grounded in other functions. Quote 123. Language speaks. Is this, seriously, an answer? Presumably, that is, when it becomes clear what speaking is. Heidegger suggests that the statement "language speaks" might seem simple, but it leads to deeper questions about what speaking truly is. By stating this, he prompts reflection on the nature of language itself, urging us to think beyond conventional definitions of speech and consider the intrinsic essence of language as something that communicates beyond mere words. Quote 124. To reflect on language means to reach the speaking of language in such a way that this speaking takes place as that which grants an abode for the being of mortals. Heidegger proposes that thinking about language is not merely an intellectual exercise, but an exploration of how language creates a space where humans can exist and understand their being. Language, in its speaking, provides a dwelling place for mortals, allowing them to engage with the world and with one another in a meaningful way. Quote 125. The things that were named, thus called, gathered to themselves sky and earth, mortals and divinities. Heidegger explains that when things are named in language, they are not isolated entities, but are connected to the greater whole of existence. Naming gathers the fourfold, earth, sky, mortals, and divinities, into a unified presence. Language, through naming, brings these elements together and allows them to relate to one another. Quote 126. The four are united primarily in being toward one another, a fourfold. Heidegger introduces the concept of the fourfold, earth, sky, mortals, and divinities, explaining that these elements are fundamentally interconnected. Their unity is not static, but dynamic, as they are constantly relating to one another in their existence. This relational unity is central to understanding how language brings the world into being. Quote 127. In the naming, the things named are called into their thinging. Thinging, they unfold world, in which things abide, and so are the abiding ones. Heidegger explains that through naming, things are brought into their essence, or thinging. By doing so, they reveal the world and allow it to unfold. The act of naming is what allows things to exist meaningfully within the world, and it is through this process that they become stable, abiding presences within the fabric of reality. Quote 128. Things be thing, i.e., condition, mortals. This now means things, each time they are gathered, unfold the unity of the fourfold. Heidegger emphasizes that things, through their thinging, shape the existence of mortals by gathering the fourfold into unity. Every time a thing is brought into presence through language, it contributes to the unfolding of the interconnected elements of the fourfold. Thus, things not only exist in isolation, but actively condition and influence human existence. Quote 129. By thinging, things carry out world. Heidegger concludes that when things thing, they participate in the creation and maintenance of the world. The act of thinging is not passive. It is an active process that sustains the world and allows it to be. Through this process, things play a vital role in shaping the reality in which mortals, earth, sky, and divinities coexist. Quote 130. Man speaks. We speak when we are awake, and we speak in our dreams. We are always speaking, even when we do not utter a single word aloud. Heidegger begins by emphasizing that speaking is not limited to verbal communication. Speaking is a continuous activity that occurs in various forms, whether we are consciously speaking aloud or internally engaging with language. It is an inherent part of being human, encompassing everything from verbal communication to silent reflection, showing that language is deeply embedded in our existence. Quote 131. Language itself is language and nothing else besides. Heidegger encourages a view of language that is pure and independent, not reduced to being a tool or concept tied to other functions. This tautological statement stresses that language should be understood on its own terms, not as a means to another end. By contemplating language as language, Heidegger prompts us to consider its deeper essence without external explanations. Quote 132. Language speaks. We answer, language speaks. Is this, seriously, an answer? Heidegger challenges the conventional understanding of language by stating that language speaks. This seemingly simple statement raises profound questions about the nature of language and its role in human existence. It suggests that language has its own voice or force, independent of human expression, requiring a reconsideration of how we think about communication. Quote 133. Naming does not hand out titles. It does not apply terms, but it calls into the word. Heidegger explains that naming in language is not about merely assigning labels to objects. Instead, naming is an act of calling something into existence through words. By naming, we do more than designate. We bring things into presence, giving them life and meaning in the world of language. Naming, therefore, is a profound creative act. Quote 134. Pain has turned the threshold to stone. Heidegger uses this line to explore the transformative nature of pain. Pain, rather than being something that merely afflicts, becomes a force that solidifies and defines the boundary between two realms, such as the inside and outside of a house. This transformation of the threshold symbolizes how pain shapes and hardens the boundary that divides and yet connects different aspects of existence. Quote 135. Pain is the joining agent in the rending that divides and gathers. Heidegger views pain as a force that both separates and unites. It is through pain that division occurs, yet this same pain also draws things together, holding them in a unified tension. In this way, pain becomes the rift that joins disparate elements, such as the world and the thing, allowing them to coexist in their difference. Quote 136. Bread and wine gather these four to themselves from the simple unity of their fourfoldness. Heidegger explains that simple things like bread and wine serve as symbols that gather the fourfold, earth, sky, mortals, and divinities, into a unified presence. These ordinary objects become the means through which the fundamental elements of existence come together, creating a moment of harmony and connection within the world. Quote 137. Mortal speech must first of all have listened to the command, in the form of which the stillness of the difference calls world, and things into the rift of its onefold simplicity. Heidegger emphasizes that human speech arises from listening to the deeper command of language. This listening is not passive, but an active engagement with the call of stillness, which brings the world and things into unity. Mortals, through their speech, respond to this call by expressing the unity of the world and things in language. Quote 138. Mortals speak insofar as they listen. They heed the bidding call of the stillness of the difference, even when they do not know that call. Heidegger suggests that human speech is always a response to something deeper, even when we are unaware of it. Mortals speak because they are listening to the call of language, a call that originates in the stillness of the difference. This listening is a fundamental part of speech, and it shapes the way mortals engage with language and the world. Quote 139. Language speaks. Man speaks, in that he responds to language. This responding is a hearing. Heidegger concludes that human speech is fundamentally a response to language itself. Language speaks first, and humans respond to it by listening and engaging with it. This response is not merely vocal, but involves a deeper hearing, an attunement to the way language calls us to express the world and our place within it. Quote 140. Poetry first causes dwelling to be dwelling. Poetry is what really lets us dwell. Heidegger emphasizes that it is through poetry that humans truly dwell. Dwelling in this context is not merely occupying a space, but involves a deeper connection to existence that poetry facilitates. Poetry, in its creative and expressive nature, allows humans to establish a meaningful relationship with the world, making their dwelling more than just a physical activity, but an existential one. Quote 141. Man acts as though he were the shaper and master of language, while in fact language remains the master of man. Heidegger challenges the conventional belief that humans control language. Instead, he asserts that language governs humans. While we may think we use language as a tool, in reality, it shapes how we experience and interact with the world. Language holds a primary and dominant role in defining human existence and thought. Quote 142. Man first speaks when, and only when, he responds to language by listening to its appeal. Heidegger introduces the idea that true speech occurs not when humans impose their will on language, but when they listen to the call of language. This response to language is what makes speaking authentic, as it requires a deep engagement with the essence of language, allowing it to guide human expression and understanding. Quote 143. Poetry does not fly above and surmount the earth in order to escape it and hover over it. Poetry is what first brings man onto the earth, making him belong to it, and thus brings him into dwelling. Heidegger clarifies that poetry is not an escapist activity, but something that grounds humans in their existence on earth. Rather than lifting humans away from reality, poetry roots them more deeply into their being and the world. Through poetry, humans come to understand their place on earth and form a more profound connection to it. Quote 144. Man's dwelling depends on an upward-looking measure-taking of the dimension, in which the sky belongs just as much as the earth. Heidegger explains that human dwelling involves taking measure not only of the earth, but also of the sky, which represents the divine or transcendent aspects of existence. This measure-taking, a fundamental part of dwelling, bridges the gap between the earthly and the heavenly, allowing humans to live in harmony with both dimensions. Quote 145. The taking of measure is what is poetic in dwelling. Poetry is a measuring. Heidegger asserts that poetry is an act of measuring the world, both physically and metaphysically. This poetic measuring is not about quantifying, but about understanding the relationship between humans and the world. Through poetry, humans take the measure of their existence, situating themselves within the broader context of earth and sky, mortality and divinity. Quote 146. To write poetry is measure-taking, understood in the strict sense of the word, by which man first receives the measure for the breadth of his being. Heidegger explains that writing poetry is a form of taking measure, not just of the world, but of one's own existence. Through poetry, humans come to understand the scope and limits of their being, as it allows them to reflect on their mortality and their place within the universe. Poetry provides a means for humans to grasp the full dimension of their lives. Quote 147. Only man dies, and indeed continually, so long as he stays on this earth, so long as he dwells. Heidegger points out that humans are uniquely aware of their mortality, which defines their existence. Dwelling on earth, for humans, means living with the constant presence of death. This awareness of death is not separate from life, but is an intrinsic part of the human experience of dwelling, shaping how humans engage with the world. Quote 148. Poetry and thinking meet each other in one and the same only when, and only as long as, they remain distinctly in the distinctness of their nature. Heidegger suggests that poetry and thinking intersect, but only when they stay true to their distinct natures. While they may share common ground in their efforts to explore existence, they must not be confused or reduced to the same thing. Poetry and thinking each have their own unique ways of approaching the truth, and their power lies in maintaining this distinction. Quote 149. The same gathers what is distinct into an original being at one. Heidegger emphasizes that the concept of the same does not mean sameness or uniformity. Rather, it refers to the gathering of distinct elements into a unified whole. This being at one allows differences to coexist within a harmonious unity, where each distinct part maintains its identity while contributing to the greater whole. Quote 150. The nature of the poetic in the taking of the measure by which the measure-taking of human being is accomplished. Heidegger suggests that the essence of poetry is found in the act of measuring, an activity that helps humans understand their own existence. Poetry, in this sense, becomes a way to take measure of life, allowing individuals to grasp their place within the broader dimensions of the world, between earth and sky, the divine and the human. Quote 151. For Hölderlin, God, as the one who he is unknown, and it is just as this unknown one that he is the measure for the poet. Heidegger reflects on Hölderlin's understanding of God as the ultimate measure for human beings, despite being unknowable. This paradox highlights that the divine, in its very mystery and concealment, serves as the standard by which humans gauge their existence. The unknowability of God creates a dynamic of constant seeking and measuring. Quote 152. God's appearance through the sky consists in a disclosing that lets us see what conceals itself, but lets us see it not by seeking to wrest what is concealed out of its concealedness, but only by guarding the concealed in its self-concealment. Here, Heidegger explains that the sky reveals the divine not by fully exposing it, but by allowing humans to witness the mystery of its concealment. This act of seeing the concealed, without fully uncovering it, represents a profound way of understanding the divine, respecting its hidden nature while still acknowledging its presence through poetic vision. Quote 153. For man dwells by spanning the on the earth and the beneath the sky. This on and beneath belong together. Heidegger argues that human existence is defined by the relationship between earth and sky. Dwelling is not limited to earthly existence, but is about spanning the dimension that connects earth and sky, the mortal and the divine. This interplay is central to human life, forming the space within which humans dwell meaningfully. Quote 154. Poetry is this measure-taking. It's taking, indeed, for the dwelling of man. Heidegger reiterates that poetry is the act of taking measure, and this act is crucial for human dwelling. Poetry allows humans to measure their place in the world, taking account of both earthly and divine dimensions. It is through poetry that humans are able to live in harmony with these dimensions, grounding their existence. Quote 155. The nature of measure is no more a quantum than is the nature of number. Heidegger challenges the conventional understanding of measuring as a purely quantitative activity. He suggests that true measure, as understood through poetry, is not about numbers or fixed quantities, but about a deeper, qualitative understanding of existence. This kind of measure is rooted in the human capacity to engage with the world poetically. Quote 156. Because poetry takes that mysterious measure, to wit, in the face of the sky. Therefore, it speaks in images. Heidegger explains that poetry, in its act of taking measure, does so through the use of images. These images are not mere representations, but are ways of revealing the invisible through the visible. In this way, poetry connects humans to the divine and the mysterious by using familiar images to point toward deeper, hidden realities. Quote 157. Poetry, first of all, admits man's dwelling into its very nature, its presenting being. Poetry is the original admission of dwelling. Heidegger argues that poetry is fundamental to human dwelling. It is through poetry that humans come to understand and experience what it means to dwell on the earth. Poetry opens the way for humans to fully inhabit their existence, connecting them to the deeper truths of life and enabling them to build their lives meaningfully. Quote 158. Man is capable of such building only if he already builds, in the sense of the poetic taking of measure. Heidegger states that the ability to build, whether it is physical structures or a meaningful life, depends on the poetic act of measuring. Humans can only create and build when they engage in the deeper poetic activity of taking measure, which helps them understand their place in the world and how to shape it in harmony with the divine. Quote 159. Poetry and dwelling not only do not exclude each other, on the contrary, poetry and dwelling belong together, each calling for the other. Heidegger concludes that poetry and dwelling are not separate activities, but are intimately connected. Dwelling, in its fullest sense, requires poetry, and poetry is the way humans come to dwell meaningfully. The two are interdependent, each enriching the other, as poetry gives shape and depth to the act of dwelling. Poetry, Language, Thought, by Martin Heidegger, challenges readers to view poetry as more than artistic expression, instead framing it as an essential act of uncovering the truth of being. Heidegger suggests that through poetry, the essence of things and the underlying structures of the world reveal themselves, allowing humanity to dwell within a meaningful universe. By bridging language with thought and action, Heidegger contends that poetic dwelling brings forth an authenticity that illuminates human existence. This work ultimately invites readers to view language and poetry as powerful forces that shape and sustain the world, underscoring the transformative potential of art to reveal hidden truths and deepen our relationship with existence.
Curious to dive into the mind of Martin Heidegger? With StudyLab Pro's Book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of poetry, language, thought in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.